We're going to finish up chapter 17 today. Yay, right? One more assignment, done with this one. Anyway, we're talking about protein synthesis and what happens if you mess with the sequence of those nitrogen bases. Well, if you mess with the nitrogen bases, you mess with amino acids, you don't have the right protein. And it depends on what that protein's needed for. Okay. If a mutation, again, that's a change, has an adverse effect on the phenotype, what something looks like, it can lead to like genetic disorders, hereditary. And if it's a genetic disorder and then it's passed on, let's say it happens on the chromosome, and then it's passed on to the next generation, now it can be a hereditary disease like cystic fibrosis. Okay, so that's an example where a gene is altered and then it's passed on, and then it leads to hereditary diseases. Okay, so there's small scale mutations. A point mutation is just where within the gene something happens to one base. Okay, a nucleotide base substitute. In other words, where let's say it's supposed to be AAC, and then it becomes AAU. Oh no, it wouldn't be in DNA. AAT, we better say AAT. Okay, so the C and the T get substituted for. Well, you think, wow, one base, is that a big deal? Yes, it is, because now you have amino acids coming in the wrong order. Okay, if the base substitute is, remember we talked about amino acids have more than one anticodon, that'd be great, but unfortunately it doesn't really, maybe it happens a lot more than we think. But if you substitute one of them, you could have problems because of it. You don't always do, but the other thing that can happen is you can actually have part of the code gone. It's deleted. Or you can have code stuck in there, inserted. And we talked about that with chromosomes. Remember, you can have longer chromosomes than you're supposed to and short too because parts get deleted and inserted. Okay, that can happen with the genes. Okay, so if you have an insertion, if you add stuff to it or you delete stuff to it, you're going to lose your nitrogen pairs. You're going to lose your codes. And if you do that, then now you don't make the right protein. Okay, the mutations can have a disastrous effects. Sometimes they're not known because they don't really code for much. But what if they do? These mutations can have a disastrous effect, and sometimes it's not a huge deal. An example would be, you probably know many people, and maybe you yourself are lactose intolerant. Your body doesn't make lactase anymore. Lactase is the enzyme that breaks down milk protein. Okay, there's a gene that codes for that. Okay, did something happen to it? Now, this is a theory now, and I don't know the whole story, but some people say that that's environmental because, with indigenous people, many are lactose intolerant. Okay, is it because we lost the gene, or is it because if you think of the environment, when you're born, you get mother's milk until a certain point, but then you really don't get a lot of dairy. You think of the prairie, the Plains Indians, they didn't milk a bison. Not a good idea. You would die, okay? There wasn't dairy products, so they didn't use dairy, so their body stopped probably making lactase. So that's the case of, is it environmental or is it, an issue with not making it anymore? I don't know. That'd be kind of a cool study if you think about it. But anyway, that's an example. Okay, so if you're lactose intolerant, you can either take the enzyme lactase as a little pill or avoid dairy products. Me, I couldn't avoid dairy products because, ice cream, come on, you guys. Oh, but anyway, that's an example where it's not really that big of a deal. You can deal with it, but there's some that are, horrendous, and actually the person's going to pass away because of it. So it depends on where the shift occurs and what happens. Okay, so if you have an insertion or a deletion, they're going to call it a frame shift mutation because you're actually going to make it longer or shorter. Okay, if it's just at a point, it's the same length. It's just one of the nucleotides is different. But if it's a whole, if you're adding a part or taking away a part, it's a whole frame shift. And again, you're going to get a whole bunch of different amino acids. Okay, here's an example. We made a copy of this one. So here's our DNA. Our RNA, excuse me, which is a copy of the DNA, except for, remember, A's and U's are. Okay, so this is supposed to make a protein. So we have this one matches up, and this one, and this one, and this one. All right, and then we have our stop codon. All right, let's say up here, this guy right here, instead of AACC, it's AATC. So there's one point. This is a point substitute. Okay, now when you look at your messenger RNA, now you're going to have, instead of G that it's supposed to have, it has an A. Well, when you start matching up your amino acids, the last amino acid is wrong. Okay? And you think, oh, one amino acid, it makes a difference. This protein can't do what this protein does because it's not right. So that's what happens when you just shift one of them. And again, it depends on what this code, it might not be a huge deal. It might be a huge deal. It just depends. But that's how you change your protein. Okay. So there's all kinds of things that can cause what they call mutation. Sometimes they're just spontaneous, they just happen. Most of the time, our body is pretty amazing at fixing that stuff. If there's a problem, we have enzymes that go in and fix it, and they'll help it during replication, they'll help it during recombination, they will fix it. But sometimes you have stuff that interferes. They're called mutagens. They can be physical agents, they can be chemical agents, okay? And I've talked about them before. Cigarette smoke is a horrible mutagen. It causes all kinds of issues. We have UV sunlight can cause skin cancer because it messes with those the proteins in your skin. Okay, they can, other mutagens would be asbestos. There's all kinds of them. If you watch TV, there's always lawyers looking to sue you because you used talcum powder or whatever. So I guess there's all kinds of mutagens, and mutagens change the code. That's what happens. So again, a mutagen is anytime you change the code in the DNA. It can be, sometimes it doesn't cause any problems. Sometimes it causes major problems. It just depends. So we are done now with chapter 17.